Grand Slam track is bankrupt and the optimism is delusional. Welcome to another rundown. I'm Dwayne. Normally we come and we talk about a number of different stories, but tonight we're gonna get into the bankruptcy, the chapter 11 reorganization from Grand Slam track. Yesterday we touched on the rundown that they officially filed paperwork. We got a chance to look at some of the creditors to see who they owe, some amendments in terms of filings and so on. And we have to talk about it because this is a track and field loving channel. And, I've been on Grand Slam for a long time. We've been talking about it. We've had Dan Kaplan on the channel. He broke initially the story there before the LA Grand Slam was canceled. But I want to go through some of these things and I want to think about it because whenever you see the idea of a chapter 11, and I'll talk about that in a second, and what that means for businesses in the United States, it always signals that there may be a return. And we've seen some of the stated press briefings by Grand Slam Track and what this might be and what it's not, and the expectation that at some point they want to return and have a successful league, and that I think is a bit of a stretch. I would love to be proved wrong, but I have a hard time thinking that they can be here. So first, what's on tap? What's a chapter 11 bankruptcy? Most people know this. If you don't, let me just do it for those who don't know. So it's a form of a reorganization bankruptcy, right? That allows the business to restructure its debts and obligations while continuing to operate with a goal of returning to profitability. So, well, they never made any profit. The goal of trying to get to profit at some point, right? So that's what they've done. They've gone through the whole process. We've seen it. They've spoken to the various people that they owe over time, and they're trying to say to them, can you take a smaller amount of money? Can we owe you later? Can we pay you at another time? And when you get to those points where you can't really do these kind of negotiations, you have to go through a process. And this process here is a challenging one, right? Because I want to get to the key component of any athletic meet of any form. It's the athletes. And when you look at the athletes and when you look at the data, you see that they're listed as obviously as unsecured creditors. So in a federal bankruptcy filing, they're not going to get any money, right? It's basically going to be wiped away in some capacity. Maybe they may have hopes of paying them at some point, but they're not getting anything. And when you look at how much they owe, it's a lot, right? So initially, when they did the filing, they said, look, they owed anywhere between $10 to $50 million. They listed their assets at that point as around $50,000. They had to amend the filing, and by there, I guess the lawyers did this, obviously, and they increased their asset anywhere between $1 to $10 million. So there's going to be some interesting things there. It's public. It was filed in Delaware. Definitely can go download that bankruptcy case if you want. All of these things are public. People get a sense to look at who they owe, and it's a lot of people and a lot of money. But I care a lot about the athletes. Obviously, we feel bad for everybody else who are involved, the media rights crew, the various people involved who probably won't get their money. However, this is an interesting thing. So let's see how much they owe. Let's start with some of the data, some of the facts of the case, right? So when you look at the report, the filing says like some of the biggest stars in the sports are owed a significant amount of money. And it starts with the world record holder over 400 meter hurdles, the 400 meter world champion from Tokyo this year, Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone, $356,000 owed. Gabby Thomas, the Olympic champion over 200 meters, she's just owed under 250,000. Kung Fu Kenny Bednarak, I think he's $225,000. Josh Kerr just short of $219,000. Paulina also owed a lot of money to, shy of $212,000. And Alison DeSantis and Melissa Jefferson Wooden all owed big sums there, just under $200,000. And so those are some of the biggest names in the sport of track and field. World record holders, multiple Olympic champions here, and world champions, and some of the people who will, if you put them on any billboard for track and field, they should be able to bring a crowd. You want these kind of stars, right? So well over $1 million owed to these elite athletes. There are other athletes that they owe money. You can dig it up and see. But that's a significant amount of money that they owe these people. And when you look at it from when I was looking at the thing, I think Sydney McLaughlin is based on ranking. So I think Momentum's chip partnership, they owe them over $3 million. And Sydney is about number 5 on that list. So it goes from businesses that help to put on the event, and then you get to Sydney. That's a lot of money. Lots of money there. And let's be clear, these aren't the athletes that are fringe by any means. And there's nothing against fringe athletes, because they're also important. You need everybody there. These are Olympic champions, world record holders, and some of the faces of the sport. And that's the part that makes the optimism doubtful by most observers of the league coming back. Because if you're gonna stiff some of the best athletes on the planet in the sport of track and field, how are you gonna assemble a league that can make them feel comfortable that they'll come back? Yeah. That is a massive challenge. Massive challenge for anybody here. And it shouldn't go without notice. I mean, because you have to think about how this was built up. We are at a situation where this is a financial reality check. It's uncomfortable. It's not rounding errors. It's basically they went way above the amount of money that they had. And we can talk about it, right? They initially said they had $30 million or so in initial upfront investment. A big sponsor pulled out after the Kingston meet. Those are questions you got to kind of think back and sit, like, after one meet, you're gone. So that means the money wasn't really secure. There's just some interesting planning here that went awry. We've talked about it before, but it comes more in perspectives, because now you can see the money shifting away. So you never really had that money. By the end of it, it turns out that you probably were walking around with something shy of $14 million. There's no way you could operate a league like this. Absolutely no way. It's a problem. And it creates this kind of marketing that you came as a savior for track and field, but the money wasn't there. And you highlight a lot of issues that are within the sport, and I agree. Nothing is perfect. We can talk about it. The Diamond League isn't perfect. The way the athletes are compensated is far from perfect. But you have to have the capital to support that. And you just never had it. And you're scrambling so much so you have to go through a formal process to reorganize the company. The reality is that the money was never there. Months ago, we talked about that the money wasn't there. But we know now, because most of that was information that journalists had or they got from sources. But these filings make it abundantly clear that the money wasn't there. They owe a lot of money. They owe $3 million to It's a lot of money. I mean, it doesn't look like a lot of money when you think about mega sports, but we're talking about track and field. They owe PMY, you know, $1.2 million. It's crazy. But here's the problem why you have to help me understand how you can recover from this. Because I often try to be optimistic in life. But tell me how. How are you going to recover from this, even if people flood in with money right now? How's that going to work? What is it going to look like in a situation like that? Because the number one issue we're dealing with here, beyond owing people and all of that, is that you've now created a trust problem. I should shout out to my dissertation advisor many years ago. I mean, I think his work was on trust, and he has a great book on trust. I know I'm veering off on that, but this is the core issue, and it's bigger than the spreadsheet issue. The trust is bigger than the spreadsheet issue. Track and field is a small sport. Agents talk, coaches talk, athletes talk. Once your trust is broken at this level, you don't reset it like that, you know? New magical money tomorrow is not gonna really immediately change the hearts and minds of elite athletes, especially the ones at the top, because they're always in high demand in some capacity. The Diamond League people come, there are different meets happening. We know what's going on with World Athletics coming with a new event next year as well. So, and athletes run sparingly or participate, and especially if you're at the higher end of the spectrum too, you often are compensated quite differently. Better shoe deals, depending on what markets you're in, you're getting endorsements. And we can talk about fairness. We talk about that a lot. It doesn't work the same way across sports, but sports is a business. And if the eyes were on the sport of track and field the way we want it to, or the way it happens every 4 years, then the packages would be much better. There's no way around that. That's a harsh reality that lovers of the sport encounter with every day. The only difference is we talk about it and we try to fix it. And this was supposedly a partial fix. So trust is a massive thing. And before I finish the topic of trust, I know some people are coming through, so I just want to say hi to them. We'll try to get to your comments in a second. I see Sherwood, I see other people who are always on the channel. So we'll get to that in a second. And thank you for being on the live. So trust gone. And actually, let me just get to this. So this is an interesting comment here. If GST fulfills the commitments and starts another season, the athletes will be there, especially US athletes who don't want to travel abroad. I don't know about that. This is an interesting one. I think you have to figure out a way to actually tell me how they're going to fulfill these commitments. And we'll get back to that. That's an interesting one. I see Sherwood responding, and we can talk about that. From here on, you have to show the money. Show me the money. Let's go back to Jerry Maguire, right? No athlete is going anywhere if they don't have that money wired to them prior to showing up. Their appearance fee needs to come before they land. Some significant portion of it has to be there before they get on a plane. In fact, the way you want to fix this, if I were to give them some advice, say they magically got the capital and they wanted to restart the league and they wanted to make sure that the athletes would come on board, is that they got to set up an escrow account. They got to set up something that's not handled by them, where the money is wired, where it's independently audited, and people know that there is the money set aside, my prize money, my appearance fee, you name it. And in some case, the athletes should get a little thing before they show up because this could be dicey. But it's there. It's controlled by an independent group, nothing to do with Grand Slam. And so people can feel comfortable that they will get paid. That's the way they got to do it. Because if you don't have that in an escrow or something of the sort where you pay a significant portion before the athletes show up, no funds, no spikes on the track. Because you are now a high risk promoter. You can't get around that type of a label. You don't want athletes to start thinking about you as a high risk promoter because they don't trust your business model. So you can't build a revolution where everyone is checking their bank accounts before they warm up. It doesn't work like that. So you have to fix that. If you don't fix that, if you don't fix the trust, assuming you can find the money, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think they will. It's not a hating thing or anything. I don't think they will, you know? It's tough. I see some people coming through. I see Sonia. And I think that's NJB. Paul says, "What's up, then? How you doing?" GST would have to pay appearance fee first. Yeah, they would have to because they owe your appearance fee. But one of the things that we saw from the filing suggests that is the reason why it's a lot more than the appearance. Sydney was getting a decent appearance fee. Well, on paper, she was supposed to be getting that, right? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if we have to see the books, to be honest with you, but you have to set aside the money. If I'm advising them, I'm sure they don't need my advice on this, but you got to escrow the money. It has to be somewhere. You know, we cannot go into negotiation with you knowing that you don't have the money. Yeah. And I get it. I really get it in some sense that what you're trying to say is you want a sport where the athletes deserve to be paid. They don't get enough money. All of that is true, but the reality is, can you do it? And you want to revolutionize the sport. Built as a savior for track and field. Doesn't work. Sherwood says, it's ironic that he called out the Diamond League for not paying the athletes well, but he turned around and not pay the athletes in full. Yeah, that's the thing. And I know, you know, I believe, you know, we've seen the statements months after months. I believe it's hurting. I don't think anyone sits here, especially Michael Johnson, because he loves the sport. I don't think he sits and think that what I wanted to do is to create this kind of a situation where the athletes wouldn't get pay. But I often said this, and and from the initial stages, I remember a lot of people had nasty things to say, is that you have to separate ambition. You also have to separate marketing from the hard part of the whole situation, which is the dollars and cents, the capital, because it doesn't work like that. And they came big. They came too big. You announce these massive slams, most of them in the United States, and you didn't figure out how to crack the market. Fundamentally, didn't even understand the Jamaica market. You know, we've discussed this before. I don't want to rehash all of that thing, but it is a problem. So, from a advisory standpoint, from a business standpoint, they failed in many ways. You got to sort this out and come back again. So I don't know. But yeah, so the trust is gone. I think that is the biggest thing. And I know there are some people on the live and other people might be watching by saying, if the money is sorted, the athletes will show up. I don't think it's that straightforward. The money has to flow first if it ever comes back. And the question is, like, you have to pay these athletes that you still owe if you expect them to show up another year. You've now treated the main asset, the talent. Everybody's important to put on a meet. You need meet organizers, you need officials, you need commentary, you need production, you need everything. But all of that comes to make sure that the athletes are seen. And if you don't pay them, what are we talking about? And I'll go back and I'll talk about it. I think the product was also a problem. I've aligned it to sometimes it wasn't even half better than a continental tour, minus a couple athletes. So that spoke a lot of volumes, right? The product wasn't good as a television spectacle. 2 or 3 day formats, never gonna work when you have too few events. Long stretches, dead air. It's a lot of polish, but no action. And it was tough. It's tough to sell that stuff. Track in a way survives on a rhythm. You got to move things forward, right? And especially for people in the stands, you have to do things that can continuously grab their attention. In a way, some of the stuff felt really overproduced. And dare I say it, underpaced when we think about when the real action is going on. So they gotta do better. It's not a sustainable television product, not especially in the United States. And you want to crack that market. That's where everybody wants to crack those markets. That's where the big bucks are. The ad revenue, you name it. And it doesn't have to be television alone. We know by that now I'm doing extension on streaming, but you need eyes. There's nobody there. Got to fix that. I don't think it's coming back. It's a massive challenge. So many comments here I probably missed. Here. I did. Thanks for saying that, Sherwood. And the failure to understand the JA market was the death nail. Look, that was a problem. And I remember talking to Leighton Levy about this as well. And he was saying like he wasn't sure who they were talking to. But I think what they wanted was a champ spectacle. They saw that, but they don't understand what that meant and how that comes about. It's a tough crowd. And it was too long. It's too, and also missed some of the what you would consider high-profile Jamaican athletes. So there's a lot of issues there, for sure. Yeah, a lot of issues. So yeah, and I will continue to say this, and I'm gonna drive this home because anybody that you can disagree with me, I know I can say things, but I think the field events is a mistake. When you don't have the field events in a track and field meet, it's a mistake unless you're running a relay carnival. And by God, the greatest relay carnival around that still exists, the longest running one, the Penn Relays, it has everything. There's field events there. It's like, I don't even know we should even call it the Penn Relays anymore. I mean, it's like a full-on track and field meet. It's just constant stuff happening. So if you don't have constant things going on, then people are going to sit there and look sideways. They're not going to have a good time in the stands, and it's certainly not going to look on TV unless the commercials are just flying like that, which you don't really have because no one's buying. And yeah, we can talk about Atlas. We saw that recently. It looked like they had a party vibe going on there. I didn't go, and there was a lot of alcohol and some form of an entertainment. I guess that worked because that event also never had a lot of events too, but they created some kind of vibe, and people who were there said they enjoyed that kind of experience. I'm not sure if I would, but I'm there to see the athletics, but that's a different story. But I get it, right? You need to have things going on, and not having the field events are a mistake, because I don't think field events are an optional thing. Do not sideline field events and talk about other people can take that on, right? They're not a sideshow. And anybody who thinks otherwise should really reevaluate if they love the sport. It's a core pillar of track and field. You don't go around and exclude jumpers and throwers. And maybe you wanted to include them, or you could have, but because of the kind of way the payouts that you're suggesting that you're going to make, you couldn't afford them. But you could have some long jump going on. You could have other things going on that would be interesting. And not only that, let's forget the event themselves. You're basically alienating some of these stars of the sport. There's no Tara Davis Woodall. There's no Mondo Duplantis, Ryan Krauser. Come on, Tia LaFont. We could name names all day. I don't want to start on the naming trail, right? You know what it looks like to have these great high jumpers, Olislagas, Mandunchik. What are we talking about? I don't think you come and tell me you're professionalizing track and field by cutting half of the profession. I was mad at it then, and even more so. That doesn't strike me as innovation. Honestly, that's basically a misunderstanding of the ecosystem that you say you're trying to reform. You can't have revolution in the sport if you're telling me that you're going to alienate certain athletes, or it only works for certain athletes. That's more akin to a filter than revolution. But that's me. It's tough. See, Sherwood is also saying the London meet organizer said no precisely because they didn't think their audience would pay that much for a meet with no field events. Plus, they told him a 3-day event was not sustainable. It wasn't. It's just too long. What kind of test? I mean, test run the thing. I remember when I spoke to Dan Kaplan, and he's like, he's sympathetic to it, because if you and those guys are business journalists, sports business journalists, so they know how the money thing works. There's a lot of startup sports that happen in the United States that looks like half-baked ideas, and they run with a little money, then they die here and there, and some of them are successful. I mean, there's this banana league thing going on or whatever, and the hockey thing here, and they're doing different mini leagues and in a couple states on women's volleyball and this and that. And it's all innovation. It's one of those things, but they go to die quickly if they don't find some level of support, or if you can't turn over the cash. You have to start showing intent for profit. Come to think, you another couple of years, the greatest spectacle on the planet will land in Los Angeles for what, a third time? Is it 3 times? Yeah. And you're gonna see some of the greatest stars and some of the ridiculous performances that we won't see. Maybe we haven't seen in a while. Maybe some new records. You never know, right? Innovation and spikes and technology and so on is creating a different landscape. And that's the thing, right? Like, you could have launched this stuff, maybe after Paris, when you could capitalize on some of that stuff, or soft launch the thing. Soft launch the thing. One event, test it out. Let's see what happens. It's like you bit off more than you can chew, and then now you can't pay the people. Yeah. So yeah, it's like 3 days were rough. I always felt it was their way of trying to stretch the TV time of, of the athletes, hoping it would improve viewership and media deals eventually. Well, if that's what they thought, they got that all wrong, right? That's not how you do it. And if you're gonna crack the U.S. market, which is hard, right, we know this, but you have to question, like, there's athletes that we can call that should be there, right? Yeah, you have Sydney, but Sydney's style is different in terms of how the edginess of a US market is, right? And how what they choose to prioritize from time to time. You need other initials. You need a NL initials and you need a SR initials if you're gonna try to break in. And I give you, they had stars. I mean, it's not like they didn't, right? They had some of the biggest names on the planet. But personality matters, and you have to push. There's a difference between being elite and the very best in what you do, and also an edginess and people know you, right? Hmm. If we go back many years ago, everybody was talking about Lolo Jones. I like Lolo a lot. I don't want to be critical. I'm not being critical here, but there's moments where we were talking a lot more, and she had the talent to win. I mean, she had unfortunate situations falling in major events as well, but it's it's a different kind of thing that they're trying to push there. We're not talking that she's the greatest athlete on the planet, right? Or the best hurdler, or coming with a silverware cabinet that's there. Not every superstar commands the off the track attention, and in markets where it's a fringe sport, you need that kind of edginess. You need the people who can participate in those spaces and bring something. It's tough to break. So I want to say the optimism is a problem for me. So you've seen the statement from, I think, Grand Slam, the way they did it on their social media account, where they talk about what this restructuring means and what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean the end. It means that they might come back stronger. All of that stuff. Maybe we'll put it up if we can. It it feels surreal because after you have unpaid athletes, you have vendors who are upset, you have a public bankruptcy filing, and your asset numbers are shifting a little bit, because first you said they had 50,000, now it's probably between 1 and 10 million. What really is it? The confidence in a comeback is striking to me. In a way, the tone is wrong, because, and I know it sounds I'm being critical, but optimism without accountability doesn't sound helpful. It sounds as if you're really detached from what really is going on here. You got to be humble about this. Any path forward, if there is going to be a path forward, and I would even put a lunch on it, is that this got to be much smaller scale, at least to try it out, to test it. You got to beg a lot of forgiveness to fundamentally ask athletes to believe in you, which comes with transparency in the finances. Perhaps they take on this idea of, if they do have the money eventually, make sure the athletes get a sizable amount of it before they show up. So be transparent. I think the design of the product needs to be much more inclusive. You got to check with your stakeholders, the fans. Ultimately, your biggest stakeholders are going to be the people willing to bat the money, put the money there. But the athletes are important. The stakeholders are important. The fans are important as well. And you got to think about the different types of fans that you really have. A lot of people who are steep in track and field, they'll watch anything. They already go out of their way to do this. And we give a lot of leeway and grace for designing or redesigning or tearing up the whole structure. If it means that at some point we'll get more fans that come into the sport and ultimately the sport is better for it because there's more eyes, there's more money, the athletes get better paid. We all want that. Got to have proof before you make all of these promises to people because it's just not a thing that we can handle. Track does need a lot of track and field needs to be reformed. We've talked about it. We've seen some of that trying to happen. We'll see a new thing come 2026 in Budapest, the ultimate championship. We've seen the calendar shifting to a major championship to end the season in a sense to kind of culminate in that way. The Diamond League did give a little more money for some events, for depending on timing. It went up to 20K last year for some events. Because I agree, the athletes deserve better. But you have to have the capital to make it work for them. At some point, there might be a new cycle in world athletics. Stepco doesn't have much longer. Maybe things change there. There's different things, different innovations. Whatever it takes to grow the sport, I'm always in support of it. But not something that takes advantage of the athletes that have to train hard, think about this as a career, when for many of them, they're struggling to get by, and some of them are fortunate to have a good life, but nowhere as close as ordinary athletes in other sports. That's the kind of reality of the sport called track and field. So I wish Grand Slam track well. I hope they could seal in new investors and they can sell an idea that there's a lot of people out there wanting to watch this product that they will put on. But it's going to take a lot of work. And you can't fix a broken sport if you want to say the sport is broken in a way by breaking trust at the same time. And once trust is gone in a sport this small, it's incredibly hard to earn it back. So I'll give them credit by saying that they weren't wrong that the payment structure and the remuneration for track and field was broken. It's there to see. And a lot of Olympic type sports that we think about are like that. Your swimming, your gymnastics, you name it. But what they were wrong about is that, they just couldn't fix it. They're catastrophically wrong about that. And I don't know if they can talk their way back into the good graces of athletes and also to the various creditors in business that they owe. The broadcasters, the event management people, the venues, you name it. The only way you can do that is to probably pay your way out of it. And this time, you got to pay up front. So, yeah, it is going to be one of those days. That's my thoughts on it. I was on a rant today, but let's see. Let's get to some of these comments and see what we can do. Sure, let's start with Sherwood at the bottom. Does the BBC rehire MJ after this? Not gonna happen. Don't think so. I also don't think he would want to be in a position like this. I would believe, I had said it earlier this year, there's no way he was going to be on that broadcast, and it turns out that that happened. For the World Championship, that was. I think he has to stay out of the limelight for a long period of time. You cannot be seen to be out there, even if some of this is not your fault. I'm not saying everything falls on him. Obviously, he's the face of it. It's his brainchild, all that stuff. So you will, you're president of the league or whatever, commissioner or whatever title. Forgive me if I get it wrong. So you will face some scrutiny. You have to stay out of the limelight. You got to rebuild this and make good. Then and only then we can see you back. But his attention has to be 100% on these type of affairs. So I think the answer to that is no. Astro says athletes need infrastructure more than anything. Maybe you should say more about that. What do you mean by infrastructure? You mean for training, for what? Yeah. Sherwood is also pointing, you have to pay attention to what the market is telling you. Yeah, the market never lies, right? The market never lies in those type of things, right? Some things it's hard to believe. Like, I have a good product. You got a good product. But if people don't buy the product, then it's a good product, but they don't want to buy it. So track and field is a great product. If you can understand it, if you know what it means for someone to jump, 895, and we can explain that, or we understand it, right? When Bob Beamon broke the world record in the Olympics in Mexico, and that's the first time Omega said, we're going to install an electronic device to measure the long jump, and the guy jumped further than the technology was assembled to measure. They had to bring out the tape. It's an amazing spectacle. There's things that is hard to explain. But if you know, and if we can explain it to people in ways that make them want to see the sport, interact with the sport, then yeah, the product, I don't think the product is a problem. In terms of the athletic ability and so on, the way we sell it that's a different story. And never claim to know the answers to these questions, but it's hard to sell. But I guarantee you, in a couple of years' time, the eyes of the world will zoom in on it for a week or so, and tons of people will pile into the stadium, and lots on television. But part of it too is around the Olympic stuff, and they will get the airtime, they will get everything, and NBC will go out of their way in the United States and the various broadcasters around the world to tell stories, because they just paid $4 billion for a product that they want you to make sure that you watch, because they have a lot of sponsors. It's a challenge, right? You think about the US producing all of these great athletes, and you got to be fidgeting on USA TV to watch part of the trials and Peacock, and sometimes they don't feel like showing it on NBC or one of their affiliate channels. There's questions around that too. Those are different decisions. Those are some decisions that are also, I'm not saying all the sport is only a problem from the sport itself. There are also other factors there, inability of some leadership, people in media leadership too, to recognize what that means and how they can invest in it. But they tend not to take a lot of chances, right? They may take a chance here and there, and then immediately they're gone back to bread and butter. Idabaka says, hopefully the reorganization helps entice investors to do something, even with format change compensate. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what they're reorganizing. You got to raise a lot of money. And you've put yourself in positions where you're going to pay big money. Can you pay less now and still attract talent? This is the kind of question you got to ask. I don't know the answer to that, but maybe if you do a one event or two, we'll see. It's not easy to break into the market, right? I was looking at Stockholm Diamond League sold out. Like it's sold out. Like literally the day tickets are out. London is the same. So there are places where it's a big spectacle. Got to do a better job in the United States. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe for another topic, how would you build a pro track and field league in the US? That's a hard thing. There's a lot of leagues that try this over time. I don't know the answer to this. I mean, even the other day they were trying that USA, what's that? Not USA. They had that league and it faded away. Ryan Krauser's trying something on field events. Many years you went back, there's different things. You could go back to the 1960s and 70s, back into the 90s. Every time there's pop-up things happening, you gotta have money. We'll watch the space on Atlas. The difference there is that there's a lot more money from Mohani, but he's saying these things. He's saying the right things. You have to wait to see if they actually will stick it out, because at some point the thing has to turn the corner, right? So you can go into debt and you could project and hopefully it will work. It looked an interesting spectacle there at Randall's Island the last time. Let's see. Yeah, it's not easy. And you can't rely on venture capital alone. So some of these things probably rely on people who have pet projects and are willing to just let the money run. So you need like a billionaire that's like okay with just losing money, for a while, because they believe in something. And it's hard to tell people that in any kind of capacity, because sports is a business. It's not entertainment. It's not fun, right? On that side of the thing. It's purely money making thing. Yeah. Yeah, I saw that US yeah, that 2026 thing with no US championship. Yeah. So we'll see. I don't know. You so Astro was saying infrastructure will be dedicated to training facilities, a contracted salary with a set yeah. So it depends, right? That's interesting. There's places that try to support the athletes, but it relies on money, right? There's lottery money in different parts of the world which go down over time. Yeah, it's a challenge, right? Obviously the sport has to be professional in some ways. It's hard, right, at every level, right? You think about it, if you're not big star in a diamond league, you're not really making any kind of money. You're probably not really making money either in the diamond league. You got to divvy that up. You actually need true contracts. You need different things. It's I get it why people sometimes after a half injury or disappointment they just decide to leave, because it's tough, right? If you're not getting that kind of support, especially if you're not getting national support from maybe an Olympic association or dedicated money from your track and field association, and you have to make money to do that and redistribute the money. It's not easy, right? So I don't know. We can do it another time again, but I've thought about this before. We've but my memory's all over the place. But we dug into some of where the money can be. Yeah. Ultimately, I don't know. There's ways you have to do it. People know the money's there, and there's no eyes on the sport outside of the Olympics, and that's the challenge. So you have to figure out how do you take those people that will watch the Olympics. And I always like to say there's going to be a bunch of annoying people coming in 2028. All the people who you talk to that don't understand uh, the sport, have all the opinions on it, but then they stop watching by the time the Olympics is over and they go back to the normal thing. You got to spin those people off, right? Maybe give them all free subscription to the Diamond League. I don't know. Yeah. How are you doing long distance 06? Oregon's AD Rob Mullins said he would like to streamline the track and field season and the bidding for the US champion. Interesting. I haven't read his the thing there. Also, a lot of people speaking of Oregon, like look at USA track last year, right? Like well, this was it this year? Yeah, what am I saying? This year, there's hardly anybody in out there. And Oregon as a spot, Tracktown USA, I love it. You know, it's a great stadium built for in university town, but it's far. It's very far. It's expensive. It's expensive for the athletes to get up there. There's not a lot of hotels. It's not easy to navigate those spaces. They got to move this thing around again, right? Especially to put it into different parts of the the country. You know, maybe build a fan base there. USA Track has to do a lot more community work and to build the sport or grow the sport. They have some money. It's not a lot, but decent money there. CEO gets a good salary. A lot more outreach, a lot more youth stuff. I know they do the youth thing, and I read the things, but it's you got to build that way. But ultimately, there's a lot of kids who get involved, but immediately they're not going to spend their time in track and field when they could probably use their skills and play football or another sport where they can get better compensation, right? I'm sure that when you think about Devon Allen, those few years that he went on practice squads and signed these short-term contracts with the Philadelphia Eagles, he would have made all in one season alone. He made more money than he would ever make in his entire time as a track and field athlete from prize money. So it shows you the difference. And I'm not trying to compare the NFL. I mean, it's a mammoth of a thing, but the golf in terms of if you have a little speed or a little strength or whatever, you would probably feel more comfortable moving to another sport. So we'll see. I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna call it. That's the rundown. It's the only rundown on the GST today. Bankruptcy. Filed in the courts. You got a better sense of who the creditors are and the athletes themselves in particular, because that's where we like to talk about. But lots of companies there wanting being owed rather tons of big money there as well. So it's not a good day, but we had to talk about it. One more before I leave. Astro says WNBA teams have advanced to being franchise based in cities. USD track and field could maybe utilize run clubs for distance. It's a possibility. I haven't gone through all of that. WNBA important. Actually, new contractual things going through here. I think they had just done the new deals for the TV rights, new collective bargaining stuff going on. Lots of money flowing into the WNBA. It's grown. It's a longer league too. Obviously, started in the 90s, and a lot of women paved their way there. It's a lot more energy. You know, if you've been to a WNBA, which I've been fortunate to go, I still haven't. I should go see the Indianapolis team again soon, but it's when the season starts again. But yeah, I like it. Are they being paid the money that they should? Probably not yet, but it's coming. It's growing, and so you got to get more in. They're much more personalities now, and they're in the eyes of a lot of people, and the sport is growing in interesting ways. And the fan base, the little girls that are showing up, the kids are showing up. It's a family kind of affair. So you think about MLS too. It took a while. I keep telling you, average attendance at the MLS is more than in Brazil. So that's for different reasons too as well. But the sport is growing. It's maxing out. They're very close to finishing the league in terms of not having any more teams and only new teams potentially now, and expansion teams only after maybe another round or so. So you have to have some development. So maybe it could be uh, something there, right? I don't know for how you would do the thing. I've for track and field, I've always been a fan of the kind of club competition. That might be interesting. It's harder to work. It needs a sponsorship. It can be the clubs themselves. So if you have track clubs, obviously some track clubs are bigger than others, and that varies. Some competition there might be interesting, but it needs a structure to incorporate that. USA track could do it. Yeah, but then do you include only USA athletes if you do that in these states? There's a kind of interesting. Well, I mean, maybe I'm overthinking it on that, but I could see. Okay, all right. I'll check that out. Long distance 06. All right. It's been my pleasure. Thanks again for the support. I hope you guys are having a good end of the year. It's getting to unwind a bit and maybe hopefully spend some time with loved ones and maybe not eat too much. It's kind of hard thing to do at this time of the year. But anyway, I'll be back again. We have some different things popping on the channel and hopefully get to interact with it. But I appreciate the support as usual. I wish you very best. Happy holidays, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.